How do you think India then is poised at the moment? Because there's so much talk about a slowdown.
Global economy is a very large economy, and there have been ups and downs in the past. But the countries that chose the right policies continue to grow. So take, for example, China. You know, when China, let's say 20 years ago, the global export market, only in merchandise, I'm not even counting services, was about between $6 and $7 trillion. Today it's 17 trillion. Much bigger today. So should I be pessimistic? No. Not only that, but during this period, if you recall, we also had this big financial crisis, the global financial crisis in 2008 when the Lehman Brothers fell. And through that, China continued to grow at about 10% a year. So therefore, it is true, you're right, that tensions are a bit high today. But we also had these boots of protectionism in the past. I mean, I'm old enough actually even to remember the times, you know, the 1980s, America was going after Japan, right? That after oil crisis, the small cars were coming in very large numbers from Japan, and the United States car industry couldn't compete, and so they really went after Japan at the time. And you know, there was a term used in those days called Japan bashing was going on. So you know, we are seeing that probably on a larger scale this time against China. But you know, these are things with which countries can deal if they have good policies internally themselves.
If they have good policies is a leading question then. How do you see India's policies and economic situation, and are we equipped to deal with the slowdown?
So I think we have done quite well in the last, I would say, 20 years or so. If I take even a long period of about 15 years, we have grown about 7.7%. In the last 5 years, we have grown 7.5% under Prime Minister Modi. But also, I think a lot of the reforms are accumulating. So, you know, we already had a set of reforms under Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, then under Prime Minister Vajpayee, now under Prime Minister Modi. And at least 2 or 3 very big reforms happened under Prime Minister Modi in the first term: the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Act, the GST, the Aadhaar, you know, the whole digital platform, and related to that, the direct benefit transfers. So those things happened. But even within the short period in the second term, and I think now the government is moving much faster. We don't see it yet, you know, most people who are not paying enough attention are not seeing it. But the truth of the matter is that within this short period, 2 big reforms on the economic side. I mean, there's other stuff going on in political side, but on the economic side alone, 2 very big reforms. One is the National Medical Commission, NMC Act, which replaces the archaic Indian Medical Council Act. So that's a big reform, and I particularly notice it because, you know, I was very deeply involved with it in the actual writing of the new act, which has now been passed in both the houses. Big one. And the other one is what we saw just within the last few days, which is the knocking down of the corporate profit tax for all companies, domestic companies, that is, to 22%, with, you know, which with other surcharges, etc., will be 25%. And for the new investment, it is down to 15% plus 2, which is 17. So that is a huge, you know, particularly if you're trying to bring in foreign companies, the foreign multinationals to our shores, which are leaving now the Chinese shores. I think that's a huge impetus, huge incentive.
Indeed. So is this current situation then, this slowdown, cyclical, or are there fundamental issues that are leading to this?
There's probably a little bit of both. The cyclical one, of course, we know that things like auto industry, for example, you know, there was a slowdown in 13-14, slowdown in 9-10. So there is cyclical element, and now currently the current slowdown for auto is much bigger, of course. But there are also structural factors at work here. And one of the big ones, I would say, is that, you know, the prime ministers fight against corruption. You see, we don't realize, but the rules under which now business is being done have changed. And a lot of the companies are still adjusting to that. take a real estate industry, for instance, easily 50 to 60% of the transaction in real estate industry used to happen in cash. Today, most of it is happening in either check or some sort of digital format. You can't make payments under the table anymore on real estate. So there's a big change, and that's a type of change that is actually happening all around. So that's one structural problem. The other structural problem is the bank NPAs. So non-performing assets are being now addressed, and in that process, what is now happening is that for the companies, in the past, people were able to get loans based on their connections and so forth. That's not happening anymore. And on the bank side, banks now recognize that if they make bad loans, they will have to bite the bullet. The rules of the Reserve Bank of India has been considerably tightened, and so the banks, as a result, are doing much greater scrutiny in assessing the loans. So for both of those reasons, there's a lot of restructuring and readjusting that's going on. So that's the kind of the other part which you said, the structural or long term.
Two things have happened recently. One, earlier this month, the US-India Business Council said that there's an opportunity for India given the global economic situation. How does India exploit that opportunity and unleash its potential? And two, there is so much talk about a $5 trillion economy, which is a rather ambitious target that the government seems to have set itself given the global economic environment. Are we on course to achieving that, first of all, and exploiting those opportunities? And B, how does it affect or help the common person, the common man in India?
So it is currently we do have a big opportunity, particularly because for two reasons, rising wages, which are already about 3 times in China than in India. So that gives India a big advantage over the Chinese wages. And of course, the trade war, which limits the access of the companies that are trying to export products from China to the United States. So many companies are trying to move out of China. So it does give us a big opportunity. And I think it is time that we really take advantage of it. The cut in the corporate profit tax is a big boost. I think that will help. But we'll need to do more on labor laws, on Land Acquisition Act, etc. Your second question on $5 trillion economy, Prime Minister is ambitious, and so of course he always sets ambitious targets. But I think it's achievable, and even if we don't exactly hit 5 billion, we'll come close. If you look at our experience in the last 15 years, in nominal dollars, we have grown easily between about 12 to 13% a year. So if we do that again in the next 5-6 years, I think we get there. But it will take a little bit of work. And as far as the common man is concerned, of course, how that benefits the common man, big time. In fact, if you look back at our own history, so when you say 5 trillion, we are saying growth. And if we look back at our history, the reason common man or common woman really did not benefit much or didn't see much improvement in her lot for decades actually after the independence, it was because we really couldn't generate the kind of growth we needed. So per capita incomes, grew at something like 1.5% between 1950 to 1980. That's too slow, and we started also at a very low level of per capita income to begin with. So therefore, you start at a low level and grow very little, you don't see much improvement. Today we got a good base also in the economy, and also, then when we started growing, particularly, if you look at between 2000 and till today, last 2 decades, massive reduction in poverty, massive increases in income, and that reduction in poverty is not, for one group or another group. It's across the board. You can look at the entire population, you can look at the scheduled castes, you can look at the scheduled tribes, you can look at Hindus, you can look at Muslims, you can look at OBCs, every single group actually, and I've done this analysis, and so it's a matter of not speculation, but very hard numbers. You see decline in poverty across every single group.